So when people talk about the worst trades of all time, the one trade that a lot of people put at number one is the trade that the Brooklyn Nets made in 2013, which they gave Keith Bogans, Chris Joseph, Gerald Wallace, Chris Humphries, Marshawn Brooks, and 4 first-round picks to the Boston Celtics for Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, Jason Terry, DJ White, a 2017 first and second round pick. And yes, this was probably the best trade for the Boston Celtics rebuild, and it is the trade that put them into the position that they're in right now with some of the most assets of any teams in the NBA. But a lot of that was to do with Boston Celtics, just their way of just working around picks. Danny Ainge's incredible job of rebuilding that team, more so than it is those 4 picks themselves. And I'm going to talk about that in this video. But anyway, before we get on to the video, we are actually getting really close to hitting 100,000 subscribers. So if you guys are new to the channel, subscribe. We are getting really close. We're just over 2,000 away, so it would be absolutely incredible. I am trying to get more videos out on this channel. Hopefully I'll be able to get 5-6 out a month from now on. I know I took a little bit of break after December, but I will try to get back on track. But anyway, now let's get on to the video. So in 2010, the New Jersey Nets were the worst team in the NBA, and they were bought by Mikhail Prokhorov, who was one of the richest men in Russia. He had a plan of making the Brooklyn Nets NBA champions within 5 years. And to do that from a 12-win team, you obviously are going to have to basically mortgage your future in order to get a better team in the present, and that's what they did. In 2012-2013, they had one of the highest payrolls in the NBA with Gerald Wallace, Darren Williams, and Joe Johnson as their big 3. And then on draft day, they made a massive trade. They ended up trading for Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, and Jason Terry to the Boston Celtics in order to make them contenders for the 2013-2014 NBA season. The season didn't start off great, but coming towards the playoffs, there was a legitimate chance of them coming out of the Eastern Conference. They swept the Miami Heat in the season series, and they ended up coming into the playoffs as a 6th seed, but they did beat the 3rd seed Toronto Raptors in the first round. And had Miami Heat gone for the number 1 seed instead of just resting their players at the end of the year and basically giving it up to the Indiana Pacers, they probably would have made the Eastern Conference Finals, because I think that they would have beaten the Indiana Pacers in the second round of the playoffs. Unfortunately, they did lose to the Miami Heat in the second round. They did make the playoffs the following year, in which they lost in 6 games to the 1 seed Atlanta Hawks, and I think that's the last time the Brooklyn Nets have made the playoffs. The Nets then became one of the worst teams in the NBA, and the picks they gave away ended up being, in 2014, James Young, 2016, Jaylen Brown, 2017 pick ended up being Jason Tatum and the Kings 2019 pick, and the 2018 pick ended up being used in the Kyrie Irving trade. So let's have a look at these picks. Obviously, James Young was a late first round pick. I'm not going to talk about that. But had the Nets still had their 2016 pick, it was the number 3 pick. The consensus number 3 pick in that draft was Chris Dunn. So even though the Celtics drafted really well with Jaylen Brown, more than likely they would have had Chris Dunn on their team instead of Jaylen Brown. The 2017 pick was the number 1 overall, which they traded with the Philadelphia 76ers in order to get Tatum and the Kings pick, because the Celtics like Jason Tatum. The Nets probably would have drafted Markelle Fultz, and he'd probably be in the exact same situation as he's in right now. And had they made the trade with the Philadelphia 76ers, probably would have taken Josh Jackson, who was seen as the better NBA prospect coming in than Jason Tatum. The Celtics drafted really well by taking Tatum, but Jackson was expected to be the number 3 pick in that draft. So rather than looking at it as they lost out on Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum and the Kings pick, you can think about it as the Nets lost out on Josh Jackson and Chris Dunn, or potentially Markelle Fultz and Chris Dunn, which wouldn't be the biggest deal in the world. The 2018 8th overall pick honestly wouldn't be that great of a player. Like, Colin Sexton was taken, and maybe Kevin Knox would be a good player to have, but honestly, would any of those players give the Nets a better future than they have right now? The Nets have built a great roster right now, and they've taken some great players late in the draft. Like, I know they used their first round pick on Janan Musa, who I think will be a solid NBA player, but Rodions Kurucs looks to be a solid player. They've drafted really well recently. So honestly, what did the Brooklyn Nets really lose from this trade? Since making this trade, they have won more playoff series than the Sacramento Kings, Phoenix Suns, Orlando Magic, New York Knicks, LA Lakers, Denver Nuggets, Charlotte Hornets, Detroit Pistons, and Dallas Mavericks combined. That's almost a third of the NBA that they have won more playoff series than, and that's combined. And had they not made the trade, they'd probably be in the situation that the Phoenix Suns or the Orlando Magic are in right now, which is constantly drafting high and constantly getting underwhelming draft prospects. And to be honest, there's not that many teams with constant high picks since 2016 that have a brighter future than the Brooklyn Nets. So yes, obviously it would have been better to have had those picks than not had those picks. But would they have won a playoff series? Would they have had a chance of making an Eastern Conference Finals? Who knows, maybe even gotten lucky and made an NBA Finals in 2014 had they not made the trade? No. And even though it did end up being a couple of bad seasons for the Brooklyn Nets, there's a lot worse stretches for teams in the NBA, like the Kings, like the Phoenix Suns, like the Magic, like the New York Knicks. and even the LA Lakers. None of those teams have even made the playoffs since that trade was made. So was it a bad trade in hindsight? If the Brooklyn Nets were to make all the right picks, yes, it was probably a bad trade in hindsight. But if the Brooklyn Nets were to make the consensus pick with every one of those, no, it actually was not a bad trade at all. Was it a good trade for the Celtics? Yes, an unbelievable trade which sped up their rebuild and put them in a great position right now. But a lot of the Celtics rebuild was to do with things like the Rondo trade, which got them Jay Crowder. It was to do with Danny Ainge drafting really well. It was to do with Al Horford signing in the 2016 offseason. It was to do with the Isaiah Thomas trade, where no one realized how good he was before he went to Boston. It was to do with Kyrie Irving demanding a trade from Cleveland. It wasn't all to do with this Brooklyn Nets trade, but obviously that trade was a big part. So honestly, I'm not going to call it a win-win trade, but it was by no means the worst trade in the world. Not even a top 10 worst trade in NBA history. If everything went perfect with all of those picks, the Brooklyn Nets would be in maybe a little bit of a better position than they're in right now. But in reality, more so than anything, the Boston Celtics doing such a good job of their rebuild has made the trade look a lot worse than the Brooklyn Nets than it actually is. And to be honest, it was not that bad a trade in my opinion. So anyway, that's the video. Thank you guys for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe.